So many of you wrote to me and said, David, you've got to check out this new interview that Jordan Peterson did with Joe Rogan. I don't know how many of you have been following, but Jordan Peterson, I don't even know that I feel the need to completely characterize it, but he basically, due to medical, we could call them medical issues, addiction issues, he dropped off the public face of the earth for years, and then now he's back. And it might not shock you guys that in the context of the COVID pandemic, he's sort of on this, it's just the problem. The reason I'm struggling is the Peterson acolytes, no matter what you say, if it's even remotely critical, they will say you're not understanding him because you're not smart enough, so you're misstating what he stands for. He's not exactly been a fan of any kind of public health measures being required. And maybe I'll just leave it at that. He's sort of like in that contingent. He reappeared on the Joe Rogan program and has become almost a parody of himself. I mean, I'm just going to look at some clips here. And again, I know I'm stepping on a wasp's nest here, because everybody's going to write in who loves this guy and say, David, you are so ignorant that you don't have the capacity to understand what he's saying. What he's saying does make sense, but I encourage you to prove that to me. Tell me that what he says here makes any sense other than being the exact type of nothing means anything postmodern nonsense that he claims to be against. Take a look at this.
Hard to sort out. The climate change one is a weird one. So
that's because there's no such thing as climate, right? Climate and everything are the same word. And that's what bothers me about the climate change types. It's like
the types. People who are like, oh, here's the science. Those types bother him.
Something that bothers me about it technically. It's like, well, climate is about everything. So, okay. But your models aren't based on everything. Your models are based on a set number of variables.
Yeah.
So that means you've reduced the variables, which are everything, to that set. Well, how did you decide which set of variables to include in the equation if it's about everything? And that's not just a criticism. That's like, if it's about everything, your models aren't right. Because your models do not and cannot model everything.
What do you mean?
Now, what's crazy about this is when people say climate is about everything, I mean, listen, correct me if I'm wrong, but when we say climate is about everything, what I think of is there's these meta issues in society, right? And those meta issues are our economic system, access to healthcare, media, and climate. And what I mean by that is, if you care about abortion, or you care about net neutrality, or you care about whatever, if you are unable to even sustain yourself economically, it's hard to be an activist because you're like, where's my next meal going to come from? If you don't have access to healthcare, it's hard to be an activist for what matters to you, because you're sick and you don't have care. And climate is in that meta issue category, in that if we have systemic climate change that damages the planet and creates death from pollution and all these, flooding, etc., it's hard to be an activist for abortion when you're being forced to relocate because of rising sea level. So that's a completely reasonable way to say climate's about everything. But what Jordan Peterson is saying is nonsense. And people will say, I scroll down right now on YouTube, David, you're not understanding the brilliance of this man. All of these claims are indefeasible. Anytime it sounds like he makes no sense, you can say you just don't understand what he's saying. It makes perfect sense. Here's another clip where they talk about, I guess this is about race and how, like, when you say someone is white, their skin is not literally white. And when you say someone is black, their skin is not literally black. It's like, I remember this conversation in fifth grade. In fifth grade, we would say, I remember a conversation with the teacher. I'm not really white. My skin is like tan. And two black kids in the class would say, I'm not really black. My skin is brown. And we were told that we're not literally, guys, this is two grown men doing this.
Depending on who you ask, either you're a voice of reason and rationality and personal responsibility, or you're a voice of intolerance and bigotry and anger and hateful.
Sexual oppression.
What did Michael
prejudice.
Eric Dyson call you? A mean angry white man?
And a mean, angry white man. Yeah.
Hilarious.
Yeah, yeah.
You're not mean at all.
Yeah.
That's what's dumb about that statement. It's you're not mean at all.
I am white. Actually, that's a lie, too. I'm kind of tan. And he was actually not black.
If you're tan,
he was
what
sort
the
of
fuck
brown.
am I? Because I'm darker than you.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah. But neither of us are white.
Well, I'm Italian.
And
mostly.
he was brown, not black.
Well, isn't that weird?
Yeah, it's really weird.
The black and white thing is so strange because
like
the shades are
tan and brown.
There's such a spectrum of shades of people.
I had this conversation when I was 10 with our teacher. I remember people saying to the teacher, "Can you explain why we're called white and they're?" We figured this out in 5th grade, guys.
Unless you're talking to someone who is like 100% African from the darkest place where they're not wearing any clothes all day and they've developed all that melanin to protect themselves from the sun. You know, even the term black is weird.
You're not really black unless you aren't wearing clothes all day. This is crazy, guys. There are people who worship this. Here, decode this one. And there's people saying this is brilliant. Here's Peterson talking about music theory. And I mean, you have to see, it seems like a parody.
So let's think about what music is.
Yes.
First of all, it's a pattern. So non-pattern music is noise. It's a pattern. But then it isn't one pattern. It's multiple patterns layered on top of one another in a harmonious manner and in a manner that indicates, in some sense, communication between all the patterned layers because they have to go together. And so, what's the world? Well, the world's made of objects. It's like, no, it's not. It's made of patterns. So music is just like the world because the world's made of patterns. And then music has layered patterns that are all moving together in a harmonious manner.
The thing that is frustrating to me about this is that I'm not saying Jordan Peterson's a dumb guy, but there's this thing that happens where it's very common that with lots of public intellectuals, the way in which they speak is not particularly accessible to lots of people. And it starts to be sort of like, well, I believe that they're really brilliant. So therefore, the fact that I don't really get this is probably my deficit. And I'm sure that everything they're saying is great. This is an example of where like some of the stuff he's saying is kind of uncontroversial, but it's all being tied together in what truly is a nonsense word salad. And it doesn't mean that there's nothing here of substance, but this is not exactly, the reaction that this clip is getting as if this is some incredible, brilliant thing. It's really not, and it has to be okay for us to say that. These are very strange rantings.
And so what do you do when you hear that, especially if it's got a beat? Well, then you move your body, and you want to, right? The music calls to you to move your body. So now you're moving your body in sync with the patterned layers of the world. Well, that's meaning. And then there's more to it. So that's so cool. Music is an analog of the structure of existence itself. And it calls to you to take part in that. And then, so maybe you dance by yourself, or maybe even better, you dance with someone else. And so then you both bring your bodies into.
Man, I mean, I just don't. Here's one about protected classes.
I think people are going after
This is part of the culture war stuff where now you can't joke anymore.
comedy for a different thing today, because they're going after comedy for a literal representation of what the words mean if you put them in print. And that's nonsense.
Yeah,
Like, that's not what a comedian's doing.
Yeah, well, they're doing that. They're doing that because there are some things they believe that can't be made fun of.
Yeah, but really what they're doing is just looking for targets. They're playing a game. The rules of the game have been established. Comedy violates the rules of the game.
Yeah, what are the rules?
Because comedy take those things. Well, there's a lot of things you can't joke about. You can't joke
Sacred
about
things.
Yeah, there's protected classes now. We all know what they are. We don't even have to bring them up. You know, whether it's trans people, gay people, people of color.
And again, this is like the perfect way to make it seem like, oh, liberals just don't want anybody to have fun. You can't have fun anymore. It's just that they don't want any fun. Of course, the truth about comedy and joking about things that are sometimes seen as sacred, the truth is context and intent matters when we make jokes about Jews or blacks or gays or whatever. And of course you can find people who would say you can never make any joke ever at the expense of these 10 groups. That's a very small portion of people. And leftists like me and others understand context and understand considering intent. And these can be blurry areas, but to make it seem as though that it's just comedy, you can't do comedy anymore. It's just not allowed if you have these things. It's just not true. All right, here's the last one. And here's Jordan Peterson explaining the book, the Bible versus the idea, the Bible. I know.
So I just walked through the Museum of the Bible in Washington. That was very cool. It's a very cool museum.
So the structure, that's what the Bible
Yeah, it's what
provides.
I figured out. I just figured this out this week. So it was a cool thing to walk through because it's chronological. They have one floor which is the history of the Bible.
Okay.
But it's not exactly that. It's really what it is the history of the book. Now, in many ways, the first book was the Bible. I mean, literally, because...
Okay, so wait a second. The floor is about the history of the Bible, but it's not about the history of the Bible. It's about the history of the book. And the first book was the Bible. Okay.
At one point, there was only one book.
Right.
Like, as far as our Western culture is concerned, there was one book. And
now, are we saying literally one copy or there was one tome?
Well, literally, there was only one book.
Okay.
And that book was the Bible. And then before it was the Bible, it was it was scrolls, and it was...
Wait, so the book that was the Bible existed before it was a book, or existed before it was the Bible?
Writings on papyrus, but we were starting to aggregate written text together, and it went through all sorts of technological transformations, and then it became books that everybody could buy, the book everybody could buy, and the first one of those was the Bible.
Wait, so how many books are there now?
It became all sorts of books that everybody could buy. But all those books, in some sense, emerged out of that underlying book. And that book itself, the Bible isn't a book, it's a library.
Oh, it's not a book at all. Guys, okay, bring it on, guys. Come tell me I don't understand the genius of that. Come tell, I'm ready for it. I'm ready for it. One of our sponsors is Kamikoto, making elegant, high-end, beautiful Japanese steel kitchen knives using traditional techniques from Honshu, Japan. I've been a big fan of Japanese kitchen knives for a long time. They have some great advantages. When you look closely at a Kamikoto knife, you see the quality of the ironwork. They only use Japanese steel. Every knife comes in a perfect heavy-duty ash wood box, makes storage really easy. It looks great in your kitchen or drawer. The balance of the knives is just amazing. I've been using them for everything. Every knife comes with a lifetime guarantee. On their website, you can see the complete list of chefs at Michelin star restaurants who use Kamikoto. And through this partnership they're doing with us, Kamikoto is giving you $50 off on top of their other special offers. Just go to kamikoto.com/Pacman and use the code Pacman for $50 off. The link is down below.